What's a quote that permanently changed the way you look at things? Don't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. This helped a lot with my guilt and burgeoning martyr complex. I've had a lot of worries in my life, most of which never happened. Mark Twain found it on a workbook for anxiety disorders. You might be the sweetest peach on the tree, but some people just don't like peaches. This helped me get over my lifelong desire to be liked by everyone, and allowed me to focus on becoming someone I actually liked. Long time ago I was meeting two women on the sidewalk, and just as we passed each other I heard this one sentence from one of them: "You don't notice your progress in life because you are always raising the bar. And now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good." John Steinbeck, East of Eden. Graveyards are full of irreplaceable people. That quote helped me stop going down the path of working myself to death because my job needs me. That mountain you've been carrying, you were only supposed to climb, really helped me overcome a lot of traumatic experiences and difficult chapters in my life. I hope it helps someone else out there. Don't let a wishbone grow where a backbone should be. It's no use wasting time worrying what other people think about you. No one is thinking about you. And remember to take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup. Been living up to those ideals recently and I feel I have just started living. It's easy to fool someone. It's hard to convince them that they've been fooled. One of the saddest lessons of history is this: if we've been bamboozled long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozle has captured us. It's simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken. Once you give a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back. Carl Sagan. Wait, did Carl Sagan actually say the word bamboozle, or are you bamboozling me? The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Dear Abby's response to a writer thinking of going back to school but worried that she will be 40 by the time she got her degree. How old will you be in 4 years if you don't get your degree? You are going to be 40 anyway, with or without your degree. It reminded me that letting age stop me from my plans was just silly. Also, working at a community college and seeing so many people going back to school in their 30s, 40s, 50s and thriving, the quote really spoke to me. I went back to school in my late 20s. Gonna graduate after turning 33 this year, and I am super jazzed to have gained all these new skills. Worrying is a waste of your imagination. I saw it spray painted on a sidewalk somewhere. Wow, my first awards. Hope it helped some people while also hoping it didn't offend others. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it is a quiet voice at the end of the day saying, "I will try again tomorrow." Marianne Radmacher. I came across this a long time ago, at a point in life that I really needed this lesson. It's okay if I feel sad and resigned. If my depression beat me for today and I wasn't able to function, I didn't fail. I'm not weak. I will try again tomorrow. Courage is not the towering oak that sees storms come and go. It is the fragile flower that blossoms in the snow. Sounds like something Uncle Ira would say. Your kid isn't giving you a hard time. They're having a hard time. The only way out is through. Assume whoever you're listening to knows something you don't. The axe forgets, the tree remembers. Zimbabwean proverb. People don't forget how they were treated. That's why it's so important to be kind. Never be so kind you forget to be clever, and never be so clever you forget to be kind. When people show you who they are, believe them. Maya Angelou. Everyone is somebody else's weirdo. Can I adopt a weirdo? You cannot convince people to love you. This is an absolute rule. No one will ever give you love because you want him or her to give it. Real love moves freely in both directions. Don't waste your time on anything else. Cheryl Strayed. Fake love is mighty convincing in a world where real love is mighty rare. You can't blame a blind person for being blind, you just don't let them drive your car. We have to realize a lot of stuff in life is beyond our control. We have to learn to live with it, the good, the bad. Just because you lost me as a friend doesn't mean you gained me as an enemy. I still want to see you eat, just not at my table. I've been dealing with a few fizzled relationships lately, and this is so on point. The last thing I wish for is for them to be effed over. At the same time, I don't need to see your face. Honey, I hope it's the worst thing that ever happens to you. From my dad when I was complaining about something. He probably didn't intend for it to be deep or anything, but it puts things in perspective. I think of it all the time. Sometimes I have to tell myself if that's the worst thing that happens to me all day, it will be a pretty good day. Wow. That's my kind of optimism. I visited Pearl Harbor this week, and the one that struck me was, there were many acts of heroism that day, not all of them recorded. It reminds me that even when nobody is watching, it's still important to put forward your best. Character is what you do when no one is looking. I can do anything, but I can't do everything. The first draft is just you telling yourself the story. Terry Pratchett. I'm not sure why this quote struck me so hard, but it completely changed the way I approach writing. Just get your ideas down and run on sentences and asides to yourself and loads of, at parts you haven't figured out yet. It took me more than 30 years to realize that a first draft isn't just a rough version of the final draft. It's a map for yourself, and no one else. We're all critics. We're also good at recognizing what's shitty about something, but then we're also bad at making something. So just make something bad and then criticize it until it's good. Dan Harmon. And I think this quote where he elaborated on it is even better. My best advice about writer's block is, the reason you're having a hard time writing is because of a conflict between the goal of writing well and the fear of writing badly. By default, our instinct is to conquer the fear, but our feelings are much less within our control than the goals we set. And since it's the conflict between the two forces blocking you, if you simply change your goal from writing well to writing badly, you will be a veritable effing fountain of material. Because guess what, man? We don't like to admit it, because we're raised to think lack of confidence is synonymous with paralysis. But, let's just be honest with ourselves and each other. We can only hope to be good writers. We can only ever hope and wish that will ever happen. That's a bird in the bush. The one in the hand is, we suck. We are terrified we suck. And that terror is oppressive and pervasive because we can very well see the possibility that we suck. We are well acquainted with it. We know how we suck like the backs of our shitty, untalented hands. We could write a effing book on how bad a book would be if we just wrote one instead of sitting at a desk scratching our dumb heads trying to figure out how, by some miracle, the next thing we type is going to be brilliant. It isn't going to be brilliant. You stink. Prove it. It will go faster. And then, after you write something incredibly shitty in about 6 hours, it's no problem making it better in passes, because in addition to being absolutely untalented, you are also a mean, petty critic. You know how you suck and you know how everything sucks, and when you see something that sucks, you know exactly how to fix it, because you're an a-hole. So that is my advice about getting unblocked. Switch from team I will one day write something good to team I have no choice but to write a piece of shit, and then take off your bad writer hat and replace it with a petty critic hat and go to town on that poor hack's draft, and that's your second draft. 15 drafts later, or whenever someone paying you starts yelling at you, who knows? Maybe the piece of shit will be good enough, or maybe everyone in the world will turn out to be so hopelessly stupid that they think bad things are good, and in any case, you get to spend so much less time at a keyboard and so much more at a bar where you really belong, because medicine, because childhood trauma, because the Supreme Court didn't make abortion an option until you're in one today was in its 3rd trimester. Happy hunting and pecking. My favorite Terry Pratchett quote is, build a man a fire, and he'll be warm for a day. Set a man on fire, and he'll be warm for the rest of his life. This is fantastic advice for programming too. Get something down and working, and then refactor, rework, to get it into a presentable, maintainable state. Too often people try to get an elegant solution on the first try, and take forever to get something basic working. Paraphrased, when people act crazy, they're either actually crazy, which is unlikely, or there's a good reason for their behavior that you just haven't figured out. Dr. David Burns in his book Feeling Good Together. Excellent book about getting along with people and trying to understand them. Worrying only means you suffer twice. The pain I feel now is the happiness I had before. That's the deal. C.S. Lewis. Oof. God punch. Grief is the loss of what we love. I always resonated with grief is love with nowhere to go, or something along those lines. Not sure where it's from. Never attribute a malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity. Hanlon's razor. Not everyone's out to get you. There are a lot of stupid people in the world. Just because it's not your fault doesn't mean it's not your responsibility. Resentment is like taking poison and waiting for the other person to die. When seeking revenge, dig to graves. Confucius. Damn. Confucius was a gangster. Immaculate and the person you love the most. Got it. There's a Buddhist quote. Don't believe everything you think. Very much related to mindfulness and the idea that you are not what you think. Sometimes we have bad thoughts that we only think because we physically feel bad. That doesn't make us bad. Just observe and let the thoughts pass. Also, intrusive thoughts. Thoughts you have literally because sometimes your brain will run simulations on what not to do. This is a high bridge. Your brain, yeah, better not throw yourself off it. You would die. Be afraid, but do it anyway. Carrie Fisher. Socializing is just like any skill. You need to practice before you're good at it. My mum, comforting me when I was struggling to make friends. My buddy Josh has autism and will occasionally ask me why anybody would even like him. I tell him I don't know, man. We just do. It's not the answer he's after, but it's the answer nonetheless. There's not a lot of things worth caring about, told to me by a close friend, and it really helped me get over my insecurities and self-consciousness. Think of things this way. After you leave school, there will be two types of people in your life. Your friends, family, and strangers you will never see again. You don't need to worry about being insecure and self-conscious with the first group because they love like you and so it really doesn't matter. You don't need to worry about being insecure and self-conscious with the second group because you're never going to see them again so it really doesn't matter. If you've watched Schitt's Creek, there's a great bit about David doing his driving test that I use when I'm teaching anxiety coping skills. The takeaway quote from the episode is nobody cares. Strangers you interact with have no interest in you and are probably not even paying attention so there is no point worrying about what they think. When I became a man I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up. C.S. Lewis. Since it is so likely that children will meet cruel enemies, let them at least have heard of brave knights and heroic courage. Otherwise you are making their destiny not brighter but darker. C.S. Lewis. Riffing on a classic G.K. Chesterton quote. Fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. End of BoJack Season 2. It gets easier. Every day it gets easier. But you gotta do it every day, that's the hard part. Also from BoJack, when you look at someone through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags. A lot of really good relationship quotes in that show that make me so sad. What happened? The same thing that always happens. You didn't know me. You fell in love with me. And now you know me. We're all going to die. All of us. What a circus. That alone should make us love each other. But it doesn't. We are terrorized and flattened by trivialities. We are eaten up by nothing. Charles Bukowski. Not sure the exact quote, but don't play chess with a pigeon. It'll just knock over the pieces, all over the board and then strut around like it won the game. In reference to arguing with unreasonable people who refuse to and or are incapable of considering viewpoints outside their own and employ logical fallacies to justify their position. It's a take on Mark Twain's never argue with a fool. They'll bring you down to their level and beat you with experience. And, by Christ, was he correct? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. A ship in harbor is safe, but that is not what ships are built for. John Shedd. My best mate's favorite quote was smooth seas never made a skilled sailor. A knight in shiny armor had never had his metal tested. If you are lonely when you're alone, you are in bad company. Jean-Paul Sartre. I understand there's a guy inside me who wants to lay in bed, smoke weed all day, and watch cartoons and old movies. My whole life is a series of stratagems to avoid and outwit that guy. Anthony Bourdain. Use what talents you possess. The woods will be very silent if no birds sang there except those that sang best. Henry Van Dyke. I like this a lot. It reminds me a lot of something my grandmother used to say, which is that all singing is good singing as long as you make a joyful noise. I miss her every day. Thank you. People don't think about you as much as you imagine they do. Similarly, I've heard this as don't worry about what others think of you because in most cases they don't. You'll worry less about what people think about you when you realize how seldom they do. David Foster Wallace. You train people how to treat you, unconsciously or not. Honesty without kindness is brutality. I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment. I will not say do not weep, for not all tears are an evil. That quote never fails to make me tear up. I also really love, and I know it's not in the books, but when Galadriel asks Gandalf why he chose Bilbo in The Hobbit, he says, I do not know. Saruman seems to think it takes great power to defeat a great evil, but that's not what I found. It is simple acts of kindness and love that keep the darkness at bay. Why Bilbo? Perhaps it is because I am afraid, and he gives me courage. People fail to realize that Gandalf is not a wizard, he is a Maria. In short, an angelic being on the same level as Sauron, who finds a small hobbit's courage inspiring. It's beautiful to me. Tolkien fought in WWI. He saw the horrors of that war, and in spite of it all, had the wisdom to know that it wasn't the generals, politicians, or great leaders that ended the war. It was the young men fighting, the mothers back at home sewing uniforms, the young children that gave the men something to fight for. It's absolutely beautiful. Don't put off the important in favor of the urgent. Today is the oldest you've ever been in your life and the youngest you'll ever be again. Draw a monster. Why is it a monster? I used to have some pretty severe anxiety as a kid and would freak out if there was any hint of danger or risk of moderate failure. My parents started not just saying what's the worst that could happen, but actually talking me through the actual worst case scenario, and more often than not, things would still always be fine. I still run through a hypothetical worst case scenario before making big decisions or intense situations, and it still calms me down. There's a lot of narcissism and self-hatred. David Foster Wallace. Regret always comes later. My father always says this, don't know where he get this from, but a lot of good things happened in my life just because of this. Tyrion Lannister's death is so terribly final. While life is full of possibilities, helped me out during some tough times and gave me hope that things could always change for the better. It's possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not weakness. That is life. Captain Jean-Luc Picard. The opposite is true as well. You can make all the mistakes and still win. 7 billion people. Someone's rolling all nat 20s. I think we all know an idiot who has rolled a few natural 20s in life. I was the victim of a series of accidents, as we all are. Kurt Vonnegut. The Sirens of Titan. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives, the aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Carl Sagan. Pale blue dot. The only thing we learn from history is that we learn nothing from history. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing. The last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. To choose one's own way. Viktor Frankl. For me, the most poignant part of the quote is the line that directly precedes it. We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may be few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing. The last of the human freedoms. A person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it. 1500 years ago everybody knew the earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everybody knew the earth was flat. And 15 minutes ago, you knew that humans were alone on this planet. Imagine what you'll know tomorrow. Agent K. From my therapist. Don't know where she got it, When you're at the ocean, you don't have to be afraid of the waves. I remember this when feeling overwhelmed. I wish there was a way to know you were in the good old days, before you've actually left them. And from the office, I had this conversation with my dad a few years ago. He told me, these are the good old days. I haven't lived life quite the same since. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Off the top of my head, Gov Schwarzenegger said something like you can either be a negative or positive person in life, but only one will get you somewhere in an AMA once. I am a pretty pessimistic person. When I read that though, it made me think about a lot of things like how my life and outlook is. I would say that single quote of his helped me evolve a lot about my life. He's right. I love hearing feedback like this and I'm glad it helped. You only have so much energy, so I'd rather use it for solutions than for beating myself up or complaining. Everybody falls, so use your energy to get up, not to complain that you're on the ground. People often confuse stress with responsibility. There are two paths you can go by, but in the long run there's still time to change the road you're on. Led Zeppelin. Don't underestimate the other guy's greed. The days are long, the years are short. Heard this after I had my first kid. Couldn't be more true. Have nothing in your houses that you do not know to be useful, or believe to be beautiful. William Morris. Never half a two things, whole a one thing. Ron Swanson. And if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. Rush. I used to struggle with indecisiveness even on important time-sensitive issues. But no action is a choice to keep things the way they are, and I had to learn that. Also, and through all of these thoughts, a buzzing anxiety like electricity. And I knew, in that moment, that anxiety is just an energy. It is an uncontrollable near infinite energy, surging within me, and for once I stopped trying to contain it. Keisha Alice isn't dead. I struggle with anxiety a lot and it made me realize that need to run from my problems can be channeled into fixing them at times. It's still best to avoid it when I can, but it is a double-edged sword that I have at my disposal. Don't die until you're done. Warren Zevon. Enjoy every sandwich. Sooner or later in life everyone discovers that perfect happiness is unrealizable, but there are few who pause to consider the antithesis, that perfect unhappiness is equally unattainable. The obstacles preventing the realization of both these extreme states are of the same nature. They derive from our human condition, which is opposed to everything infinite. Primo Levi. Survival in Auschwitz. You're going to make a lot of people mad doing what's right for you. In order to empathize with someone's experience, you must be willing to believe them as they see it and not how you imagine their experience to be. Brené Brown. If everyone around you is an a-hole, maybe you are the a-hole. The other version of this is, if everyone you meet smells of dog sh, check your own shoe. I say, beware of all enterprises that require new clothes, and not rather a new wearer of clothes. Henry David Thoreau. There is no such thing as multitasking, only rapid switches.